Well, the three Stoeven brothers were Lawrence, Harold, and Chester. And they were born in 1900, 1901, and 1902. And they had a sister, Selma, who was born in '04. And eventually she and her husband also invested in Stoeven Brothers. They were a part of it. And Lawrence had worked at a meat company in South San Francisco called United Packing Company. And he worked there for 20 plus years. And my dad, Harold, was playing semi-professional baseball. And he played for the Stockton Courts, and they played against the Sacramento Solons and the Royer brothers. And so he knew them, or knew of them, when we came to town. And then we went to Denver, and he played for the Denver Bears. And at that time, players were only paid for the time that they played, which was maybe 4, maybe 5 months. And then they had to have a winter job. And so my dad went to work for the Denver Meat Company. And my mom's mom got ill, and my mother and I came back to California to be with her, and my dad followed as soon as he could and was able to. But prior to that, he had been called up to Atlanta, Georgia. And they were going to pay him $300 and something a month for playing baseball. But I was in school, I guess I was the fly in the ointment, and so he joined us out here, and he also went to work then in South San Francisco for the United Packing Company. And he was there about 15 years. Well, my aunt and uncle, Lawrence Stoeven, had settled in San Bruno. And so when Mom and I and Dad came back, then we went to San Bruno also. And my dad hated the commute even then to go to South San Francisco. And a few years later, my great-grandmother had passed away, and she had left a slight inheritance to her grandchildren. And so with that, we left San Bruno and settled in San Mateo. And that's where we were when we came to Dixon. And Chet Stoeven lived in Stockton with his wife, Leah, and he had worked for the PG&E. Well, I guess the men, let's see, a little background of the two families, Lawrence and Hazel, and my mom and dad. They went to business college in Stockton and met there. And on December the 23rd of 1922, the four of them, my mother, who was not my mother at that time, but anyway, the four of them eloped to Fresno. And they were going to keep it a secret because where the women worked, if you were married, you could not hold a job. But when they came back from Fresno, the ladies went to their respective homes, and the men went home where they were living. They were 22 and 21, and they went home to Mom and Dad. Well, she met them at the door, having read the vital statistics, and had their clothes packed, and said, "You have wives now, go home to them." So, anyway, all was forgiven, and they went on with their lives. But so there was a background in the meat industry before we came to town. And back to the meat packing, the Lawrence and Hazels had settled in San Bruno, and we joined them, and then we went to San Mateo. And I guess the men got together and decided that they were going to go into business for themselves. And they went up and down the state looking for some place that they could buy. And they found this little building that was closed south of town. And they, each one, the two families in San Mateo and Chet and Leah, all sold their homes and what other things they could do and put their money in this unknown adventure. And Ross was the senior at that time. Oh, I know, when Ross and I were around the same age. They were 47, 48, 49 when they came to town. And when Ross and I were the same age, I said to him, do you think that we could have done that, sell what we have and just put them in, you know, gamble away and stuff? But Ross was a senior at UOP, and he had scheduled his courses on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, he worked in a meat plant, a lumberyard. And on Saturday nights, well, he had a band even then, and on Saturday nights, and usually every Saturday, he played and stuff. And so we were going to move up here, and the manager of the lumberyard had offered him a job after he graduated from UOP. And Ross said, well, no, I'm going to move to Dixon, and I'm going to work in a slaughterhouse. And the guy asked him, what are you going to do there? And Ross said, I don't know. And the boss said, I'll be darned if I'd go to work in a slaughterhouse if I didn't know what I was going to do. So, anyway, the men came to town in June and went to work with the contractor to save money. And the plant was enlarged 2 times and cost, to be twice the size that it was. And it also cost twice as much as they had thought it was going to cost. So they went to the bank, and the bank said, well, it's just going to take you longer to pay off the loan. And so they buckled in and went to work. Well, the 3 Stoeven families all found places to live. And Ross and I didn't have a place. And the first time that we came to town was a terrible, blustery, north windy day. And so that was my introduction to Dixon, and I didn't know whether I was going to like that endeavor or not. But we couldn't find anything to rent, and I was expecting. And I went to the Tribune to put an ad in the paper, and while I was standing there telling the woman what I wanted to put in there, this woman said to me, well, my husband and I just moved down Doyle Lane, and we have a 2-story home, and we're only going to be using the bottom of the house, and you can have the top floor and kitchen privileges. So it was Millie Thompson. And have any of you been down Doyle Lane lately to see that gorgeous home now? Oh, it is amazing, and you should ride down there and see it. But anyway, when I went home and told my folks, or told my mom, that we found a place and we were going to move in with these people, and she said, well, if you're going to live with somebody, why don't you live with us? And so that's what we did. When we came to town, we moved in, and they had found a place on F Street and North Adams. Chet and Leah found a Covington home on Jefferson, and Lawrence and Hazel found a place on D Street, and that was before it divided into North and South D. And so while we were living with Mom and Dad, I was out one day and I saw this man putting a stake in the ground, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm building a duplex." And I said, "Is it taken?" And he said, "Well, one side is." And I said, "Can I have the other?" And so it was Charlie and Alma Hughes who lived next door to us, and we lived there for 4 years. But anyway, getting back to the business, they started with killing about 40 cattle and about 200 sheep a day, and they had about 16 employees with the partners. And the Tribune had some articles over there, and by the way, Susan at the library was very helpful and did all that for me. And it says in there that the operation was going smoothly, and so everything was progressing. And Lawrence was the cattle buyer. My dad ran the office, and Chet took care of the ranches. We leased the Vaughn, the Swan, and the Fox Ranch. And Chet oversaw the ranches. And one summer, Michael, my son, went to work and got some starweeds out of one of those ranches. And the next summer he thought, well, I'll go to work at the bank. So anyway, the picture over there is of my grandfather in 1902. And he had a butcher shop, and that's in Livermore. And we enlarged the plant. The plant went very smoothly. We enlarged the plant in 1963, and then again in 1976. And when we first opened, we had problems. There was a tank house, which you can see the water tank on the front picture there. When we first opened, I guess there was a glitch or something, and the water would not come, and you cannot operate a meat plant without water going constantly. So the Dixon Volunteer Fire Department came out with their tanks, tank cars, and gave us water, and we were able to proceed. And Ross drove truck for a while, and he would go to San Francisco, and he said it really wasn't much fun to park on those hills and try and lug a carcass of beef or something into the butcher shops and things. And then he joined Larry as salesperson, and they would go to get customers and see them in person, and then do most of their business by telephone. And by the way, when we came into business, we had to put the telephone line from the city, down to the building, because there was no service there. And so they were the salespeople, and Bob put up the kill usually. And when the Vilchers first started, Bob had still been in school in Oregon. And when Larry married Phyllis, they moved to Woodland and did not live in Dixon. And Bob and June lived in Dixon for a while, and then they went to Sacramento. And into Arden Hills. And their older daughter swam for that. And she was a very good swimmer. In fact, they thought that she would become an Olympic swimmer, but she peaked. I guess swimmers do that, and so that didn't happen. But a young Neil Rodeville in the 1960s came to work for the plant, and he was a mechanic and took care of the trucks. And he worked for about 4.5 years. Well, while he was working there, he and Mary lived on some property that kind of is by Asian Gardens now, and had some almond trees on it. And the person who owned the property said he was not going to harvest the almonds, and Neil was welcome to them. And so he did. And he came to Ross and he said, "You can't imagine what I made on those almonds." And so he went to UC and Davis and studied, thank you, and about almonds. And as they say, the rest is history. In fact, he and Mary just celebrated their 80th birthdays yesterday. Everyone worked very, very hard at the plant. I don't think being in the meat business is the easiest thing in the world. There were long hours, and Ross was on the city council and on the planning commission. And I remember one night he came home, changed his clothes, and went to work. Because they go down, both he and Larry, either one went with the grader or one worked on the loading dock. And, it was 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. They were very long hours. And so he didn't run for office again. Oh, one time, Larry and Ross were down in the basement shaking hides, getting ready to send them to the tanner. And Larry looked at Ross and he says, "Aren't you glad we graduated from college?" Oh, and one winter there was a lot of flooding, and Chet helped the Glide family get their livestock on safe ground. And so they told him to come by later in a few days, and because they saved the animals. And so they knew Chet just loved to ride horses, which he did, overseeing the ranches and things. And they said, "You can have one of these horses, take your pick." And it wasn't Elson, it was one of the brothers, I think. And I don't think it was Elson. But anyway, Chet said, "Well, I'd love that horse." And they said, "Oh, I'm sorry. You can't have that one, choose another." And so he chose the other, and then they said, "Take both of them." Yeah. And so, anyway, early on, I forgot this, having a mental break. Oh, Corner Cafe. Where Bud's is now was the Corner Cafe, and owned by Tom Wong. And so, being in the meat business, everybody from Mace's or Stoeven's or those that didn't eat at home, their breakfast went down there. But Tom Wong, when he finished cleaning up at night, would get the coffee pot ready for the next morning and then set out sweet rolls. And he would leave the door open and go home. So that the workers came in the next day, took what they wanted, and then it was all honor system. They left the money near the cash register. That was early Dixon. But when we came to town, the population sign said 1,700 population. And everybody was so very welcoming, Muriel Sievers especially. And Dixon has been just a wonderful place to live and to raise children. And we're lucky to have grandchildren and great-grandchildren here. So anyway, the plant continued to flourish, and At the height of production, after having started with 40 cattle and 200 sheep, they went to 400 and 500 cattle in 5 hours and 700 to 800 sheep in 3 a day. And so it was, and we all had a good living. And then, and of course, we were union, and we were state and federally inspected. And at one time, the Idaho and Colorado and other states could come in with their products much, much cheaper than we could, because we were all union. And people made good salaries, made good living at the plant. But things started to change after that, and you can't run a business if you're not making pay. And so there were many plants around the same time that closed in California. And we were able to close, and it was unfortunate. People, lost their jobs. Our son was a cattle buyer, and he lost his job. But it just wasn't feasible to keep the plant open. And then we sold the plant, and one paper said we sold it for $14 million, which would have really been nice. But we sold it for $1.4 million. And we were able to pay our bills, and it was solvent, and those of us who had invested in the plant were able to get our money out, but we didn't make anything on the sale.
What year was that? Do you remember?
81. And so these are some of the people who worked for us. With Harold Robin and Jean Robin, Nick Stacy, Joy Sullivan, Kenny and Carvey McGrew, Tim Gallagher, Billy Rain, Ralph Mack, Howard Fairfield, and Nick Asharte, Tony Bello, Al Bello, J.B. Tamplin, Frank Alacarn, and Jimmy Conley, and Bob Rutledge. And one thing I do want to say is there was a wonderful camaraderie between the Marks meat plant in Woodland and the Mace meat plant. If things were not going right and things were not selling or whatever, they'd commiserate with one another, and there was always respect there. And Danny and Willie Marks were some of our dearest friends. After we closed, and I don't really remember just how long, but not too long, we were sued. And we were sued by the Teamsters Union. And it was an obscure tag onto a law that Jimmy Carter had signed that said if we had stayed in, if a business had stayed in business, this is what you would owe the union. And they wanted $85,000. Well, since we hadn't made any money on the sale, the money wasn't there, and we hired an attorney and ended up by paying the union each. There were 3 of us then, Bob and Larry and Ross, $50,000 apiece. So that's our experience with the meat business. But it was a wonderful living while the plant was going. And some of the people that lived across from us, from the duplex where we lived, were Joyce and Joel Hull, and Vince and Phyllis Rossi, and Herman June Pister, and across the street from them was Mary and Ira Finney, and on the corner was Mary and Bob Alexander, and we lived in the duplex for 4 years, and then we built our house, and when the plant was doing well, then Chet and Leah built on Marvin Way, which Lynn is in that house now, stayed in the family. And Lawrence and Hazel built next to Barker, the house that is next to Barker. And of course, most of you know that we live on, yeah. And Mom and Dad built on 8th Street, right around the corner from us, and that was great. And we had 3 children, and Bob and June had 4 girls, and Larry and Phyllis had a boy and 2 daughters. And everybody, Nancy is still alive, that's Larry's daughter, and the 4 Stoeven girls are in different places all over the United States doing very well. And Hal was going to come with me today and talk about being a meat buyer, which he did, and put many, many miles. He traveled to Oregon or Nevada or Idaho, and I asked him, because he was going to come and talk about it, and I asked him, well,